Broadband Adoption and Literacy. This workshop is being co-sponsored by the FCC's Media Bureau and the Advisory Committee on Diversity and Digital Empowerment and Inclusion Working Group. I am Anna Gomez, and I chair the Advisory Committee alongside Heather Gate, who is unable to join us today. And I serve on the committee on behalf of the Hispanic National Bar Association. Our workshop is virtual due to the concerns related to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. As the Advisory Committee stated in its June 11th statement, recurring racial violence and hostility against the Black community, compounded by the disparate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on communities of color, have laid bare the ages-old social, health, and economic inequities and systemic racism that continue throughout the country. I want to thank the FCC, and especially Michelle Carey and Jamila Best-Johnson, for supporting the release of the Advisory Committee's statement on civil rights demonstrations and the racial divide. You see a portion reproduced here, and you can find the full statement on the FCC website. Now, turning to today's workshop. Our workshop today will feature experts from libraries, academia, and civil society organizations who will discuss efforts to support underserved rural and urban communities' acquisition of digital skills. These amazing experts will consider what constitutes digital inclusion today and the role of libraries and public-private partnerships in supporting digital literacy. And the panelists will also address the impact of COVID-19 on advancing digital inclusion, as well as the impact of various local, state, and federal interventions in recent months. Finally, I would like to thank Michelle Carey and Jamila Best-Johnson again, along with Jamil Kadre and Julie Saunier, for their unflagging support of this committee's work. I'm now going to turn this over to Rudy Brioché, who chairs the Digital Empowerment and Inclusion Working Group. Rudy and his working group have been tireless in planning this workshop, and I very much look forward to hearing from our experts. Rudy?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining this workshop. The Digital Inclusion and Empowerment Working Group was proud to lead the Advisory Committee adoption of such a very powerful statement and to reaffirm our commitment to assist the Commission's efforts to expand digital inclusion and empower diverse communities to spur educational, economic, and civic development. The working group itself, the goal of the working group, is to examine ways in which we can enhance both empowerment and inclusion of communities in this increasingly digital world, particularly in light of COVID. Building on the work that our colleague Heather Gates have done in previous iterations of this working group, we're expanding the human conversation, the conversation about people, how people are part of this digital divide. And we're also looking to assess how to overcome barriers to adoption, to using not just broadband, but also all advanced technologies, such as computing devices, laptops, beyond mobile devices, but tools that students can use to get ahead, that the elderly community can use to stay connected, but also looking to see how we can use advanced technologies such as coding, such as advanced technologies as artificial intelligence to help that AP student get ahead, to help that person with a physical disability who needs to access assistive technologies that requires broadband, and that small business owner that was looking for ways to access new technologies to either reduce cost or to connect to manufacturers throughout the globe, or to even develop ideas, to develop new products, to develop new systems. All of these are done by individuals, by entrepreneurs, by students, by creators, and we need to help to foster, to expand all of that. So that's the goal today. Today we are expanding our discussion to really examine the way broadband adoption and use in this divide itself. And we're looking particularly at how U.S. libraries, a key community anchor institution, working with community-based organizations and how they help to bridge this divide in adoption and use of broadband. So this is a very important discussion. We believe it's important because a lot of the conversation really focuses on, well, at least to date, focuses on the actual deployment of broadband, which is important. But based on data from the FCC and other sources, the share of Americans who have access to fixed broadband but do not subscribe is actually 5 times the share of those without access to broadband. So we need to have a conversation that looks at broadband use and adoption. Approximately 5% who lack broadband compared to 27% of those who do not subscribe even when they have broadband available to them. So we need to expand this conversation to make sure that the relevance, the incredible use of broadband is part of that discussion and how we bridge that divide between those who actually adopt and use and those who do not adopt and use broadband. So the working group will expand this discussion, and we recognize that we need to redouble our efforts to address this adoption problem. And we recognize that the challenge to get people to both not only adopt but also to stay online is an issue that becomes even more so increasingly difficult in light of the current health and economic crises that many people are experiencing today. The goal of the workshop is 3 very specific goals. First is to focus on U.S. libraries and their partners. Examine the way community and public-private partnerships develop best practices. There's a lot of innovation that is happening, and it's innovation that happens across income segments. But we want to make sure that everyone is part of this discussion, everyone is part of our moving forward to this all-digital world. And finally, first to evaluate how COVID-19 has actually helped, and in many ways have actually laid bare these areas of deficiency, but how libraries and other community organizations have responded to this effort in really remarkable ways. So we've been having this discussion internally with members of the Digital Empowerment and Inclusion Working Group. And this really reflects a group of stakeholders from industry, such as Comcast, Charter, Dish, T-Mobile, and Verizon, but it also includes community-based organizations that represent African-American communities, Latino, and Asian communities as well. All those are members of this working group, and we've been having this discussion, not just amongst ourselves, but also including local and federal government as well, because they are a meaningful part of this discussion. I'd be remiss to not mention one person who is not actually listed here, but someone who's actually been very much important to our conversation. And I mentioned her before, and that's Heather Gate, who is unable to be here. Heather, our prayers are with you, and we hope you a speedy recovery very soon. Heather is with Connected Nation, a leader in this conversation. So we've been having these discussions about broadband adoption internally. Today, we're going to expand this conversation, have it with community leaders throughout the United States. And the individuals who are going to help us do this are members of the working group themselves. So without further ado, let me turn to Rein Contractor, who has been a leader of this working group in many ways. Not only is he going to chair this discussion around panel 1 on the use of libraries and state libraries, their perspective in this area, but also in terms of developing the policy statement regarding racial strife. So, Rein, thank you very much for your leadership,